Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra. Donald Trump will return to the White House after claiming a stunning U.S. election victory over Democratic opponent Kamala Harris with a total of 71.18 million votes and 277 electoral votes. You need 270 to become president. He has quashed all the poll predictions and surpassed the 270 electoral college votes by winning in 28 states, including all the swing states. During his victory speech at West Palm Beach, he said that God has spared his life for a reason and that he is prepared to usher a golden era in the United States. But what led to this massive victory is the big question. How has he performed compared to the former president, Joe Biden? How did the Trump camp perform in the swing states, and a lot more? That's exactly what we will discuss with our guest, Mr. Pradeep Kapoor. Former diplomat is with us on the show. Professor Madhav Nalapa, the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us on the program. Mr. Keith Was, former British minister, joins us all the way from London. Dr. Sriparna Pathak, associate professor, international relation, O.P. Jindal Global University, also joins us on the show. Satoru Nagao, fellow Hudson Institute, is also with us on the program. Kamal Bali, president of Volvo, with us on the show as well. Before I begin this discussion, I'm going to go up to the big wall and tell you what has been the difference between 2020 and 2024. It's been a fascinating election. In fact, it's been more fascinating for the Republican candidate Donald Trump than it was for Joe Biden. So this is how the comparison unfolds for both these presidents. If you look at 2020, the electoral votes that Donald Trump got was 232. He is content with 277, but look at what Joe Biden got, or the Democratic Party got, in 2020. It was 306 as compared to 224, which Kamala Harris got, which is, of course, way below par, way below expectations, and disheartening for the Democratic Party as well. Let's take a look at 2016. Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton with 232 votes is what Hillary got. And Donald Trump, of course, did much better in 2016 as compared to 2024, where he had 306 electoral votes. It was an emphatic landslide victory for Donald Trump, who's going to become the 47th president. The popular vote comparison, if you look at what happened in 2020 vis-a-vis 2024. In 2020, of course, Joe Biden, who got 306 electoral votes, was at 51.3 in terms of popularity, which translates into 81,284,666,000 votes. And in 2024, Donald Trump at the same spot with lesser figures in terms of the total number of votes he got, but the popularity that he garnered is at 51.3%, and it remains the same. Remarkable it is for Donald Trump. A lot of people on social media are calling it the political comeback of history of its time. Okay, 2024 is, of course, what we're looking at this point in time. Look at the comparison: 306 for Donald Trump in 2016, 8 years ago, 277 electoral votes in 2024 with 51.3%. In fact, so the interesting part over here is, though he's gotten more number of votes, the popularity index at this point in time is almost the same. It's 51.1% in 2016. It was 51.3 in 2024. This is an interesting facet showing the depth of the people who in fact wanted to have Donald Trump as the next president against Kamala Harris. These are the 2020 results. If you look at Trump and the red states, of course, the swing states, including Pennsylvania, did not go to him. New York also did not go to him. In fact, Donald Trump is from New York. He was born in Queens. Biden, of course, getting 306, with California once again going to the Democratic Party, which has 54 electoral seats. And here again, California has gone to Donald Trump. But if you look at Arizona and Nevada, which have not completed counting, are in fact going the Trump way so far. In 2016, once again, Donald Trump got 306, and if you can see, it's a sea of red, sporadic colors of blue in the middle. Of course, some of these states, including Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico, always vote Democratic, and that's exactly what they did this time as well. But the swing states in 2024 going the Trump way, and Harris, of course, losing out on these important states. Though, of course, she did 10 visits in these states in the last few days, but that did not translate into any kind of a victory lap for Kamala Harris. Okay, Wisconsin, an important state for Donald Trump in 2024. He got 1,638,000 votes as compared to Joe Biden, who got about 1,630,000 votes. So not much of a difference. This is one of the key swing states, and you can tell that the margins here have been extremely minimalistic, and this is where the Trump magic, or perhaps the Trump image, has done wonders for him. Michigan, another important state, has 15 votes. Donald Trump getting 2 million and 2.5 million votes. Joe Biden in 2020, in fact, getting almost 3 million votes in the same state. It was an emphatic victory for the Democratic Party. As we all know, Donald Trump, coming at the back of a poorly managed COVID-19 pandemic, had made a lot of blunders, had made a lot of predictions which did not come true. And that was the reason that he lost. Pennsylvania, one of the most important swing states. In the beginning, the early trends did show that Kamala Harris was winning Pennsylvania, but it all boiled down to Donald Trump getting around 3.5 million votes. And that's more than 0.7% more than what Joe Biden got in 2020. North Carolina, another important vote where Donald Trump got 51.1% of the favor this time as compared to 2020, where he got 49.9%. The vote, if you can tell, there is a difference about a couple of lakhs, which in fact represents 16 electoral votes of the Electoral College in the United States. Very interesting facts that we get to see if you compare both these candidates. In Georgia, again, an important state, a very cold state in the northern United States, Donald Trump was able to manage 50.8% of the votes, which translates to 2,648,000 vis-a-vis what Joe Biden got at almost 50% with 2.5 million votes. So once again, the margins here have been difficult for either of the candidates, but it's these small margins which have literally defined who the president is going to be. In Arizona, where you have 11 electoral votes, Donald Trump with 50.9%, a million votes to him, and 1.5 million, a little more than 1.5 million for Joe Biden in 2020. So like I said earlier as well, 2020 was an emphatic, a landslide victory for Joe Biden, which of course Donald Trump refuted. He said that the elections were rigged. When he said the elections were rigged, he was talking about these important states. Nevada, of course, where Las Vegas is, Donald Trump in 2024 has managed to get 653,000 votes, and Joe Biden a little more than 700,000 votes. Of course, the voter turnout also this time a little lesser in Nevada as compared to what we got to see in 2020 for Joe Biden. Wisconsin, another important state, Donald Trump with 51% of vote, and Donald Trump, and again in 2016, got about 1,400,000 votes. He's bettered that count with a couple of hundred more thousand. So that again tells you that these margins have played and have added up for the kind of victory that Donald Trump has been able to garner. Once again, in Michigan, a cold state, Detroit is the capital, home of the automobile industry in the United States. Donald Trump with 51.1% in 2024 and 47.3% in 2016. It represents 15 electoral votes. Remember, these electoral votes all add up to take the count to 538. Whoever gets above 270 is the victor. Donald Trump has 277 this time around. Pennsylvania, as we keep going back, is a very important state. This is the difference in votes that Donald Trump has been able to achieve, and if he's gotten around 500,000, 500,000 votes more in 2024, it says a lot about Pennsylvania, because most of these voters were sitting on the fence, not sure whom to vote for. This time they feel that their issues are best represented by Donald J. Trump. North Carolina, again, 2 million, I beg your pardon, and 900,000 votes approximately, as compared to 2,200,000 votes for Donald Trump in 2016. Another increment of 600,000 votes, which again goes on to show you that people wanted to vote for Donald Trump in North Carolina because of the issues that they have been talking about. Not much in Georgia, though, in comparison to what we got to see for the Democrats. But for Donald Trump, once again, there is an increment of 600,000 votes right there, which raises up the percentage as well. That depends on the voter turnout too. But this again solidifying that same message that it's these 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, 600,000 number of votes which have added up to take Donald Trump to that very handsome tally. In Arizona, once again, of course, there is a dip for Donald Trump in Arizona, up for about 200,000 votes. This state represents a hot state right next to Nevada. This represents an area where there is a lot of Puerto Rican and Latino population that in fact should have voted for Donald Trump after the comment that was made by Joe Biden, but perhaps that did not resonate too well with them. Okay, this is Nevada. Once again, in 2016, Hillary Clinton, who lost to Donald Trump, did not get a very impressive tally. She got about 500,000 votes as compared to Donald Trump, who's almost secured 1,700,000 votes in Nevada, which is a populous state. Donald Trump has opened casinos in Nevada, similar to the ones he has in Atlantic City, the Taj Mahal. Georgia, Joe Biden doing averagely well, but again, the point that I was making, that Donald Trump raking in another couple of 100,000 votes in 2024 for these 6 electoral votes to leave the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris behind. And these are some of the big flips, if you can call them, or some of the smaller takeaways which have resonated big for Donald Trump. In 2024, Nevada has given Donald Trump 653,000 votes. If you compare that to 2016, with Hillary Clinton, he's done much better, but not as well as Joe Biden did in 2020 with almost a little above 700,000 votes, which is, of course, 1.4% more than what he did in 2016. So this is how the cookie has crumbled for Donald J. Trump. And this is indeed a moment of glory for him. This is indeed a time for the Republican Party to feel rejuvenated. If Donald Trump would have lost, they would have been in the same seat as the Democrats find themselves today. We'll talk about this with our guest. Professor Madhav Nalapat is here with us. Professor Nalapat, appreciate you joining us, sir. I hope you can hear me. Professor Nalapat?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. Sir, what do you make of, apart from all the nitty-gritties which have led to this important resurrection, if I can call it that, for Donald Trump, what do you think is responsible for, the victory of a candidate who's been marred and slapped with court cases, has been called a felon by his opponents, has accused his opponents of also using state machinery to target him, but here he is defying all odds to become the 47th president of the United States.
Vineet, if you check what I wrote in Sunday Guardian and some other publications also on television, I was very clear that the prosecution, and one of my colleagues will remember, prosecution-persecution of Donald Trump by the Biden administration, especially the Justice Department, was going to backfire badly on the Democrats and make Trump into a victim. Frankly, the phenomenon of Trump rising politically came about because of these Biden prosecutions, quite frankly. Otherwise, Donald Trump may have just faded out. But because of these prosecutions, and they were quite a contrast to the way that they went after Biden for a lot of the same things, and against Donald Trump. So the public, I think, saw Trump in a sympathetic light. He became the victim and not the aggressor that the Democrats were painting him out to be. So I think, frankly, that the way Joe Biden, his Justice Department has targeted Donald Trump has been
Right. Professor Nalapat, seems to be a problem with your network. In fact, let me also rope in Keith Vaz into this conversation. Keith, I hope you can hear me. Keith Vaz? Keith, if you're there with us? Okay, let me also rope in Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor into this conversation. Ambassador Kapoor, I hope you can hear me, sir.
Vineet.
All right. Sir, What would you like to tell Kamala Harris today? Obviously, she's also being targeted now and being called a sore loser because after she heard of Donald Trump's imminent victory, she cancelled her speech to her supporters and left. This is obviously a train wreck kind of a situation that the Democratic Party did not anticipate. But what can you say? Joe Biden, until 4 months ago, was the primary candidate of the Democrats. And Kamala Harris, who has not even won a primary in her life, she's been a public prosecutor all her life, came into the fray only a few months ago. What would you, how would you assess this situation when it comes to which candidate fared better than the other?
Thank you, Vineet. What I would like to say is before we discuss about Kamala Harris, one comment which I want to make is that the news coming on the Indian channels about the elections, US elections, has amazed me absolutely. The work that the Indian channels, particularly channels like NewsX, have done in understanding the depth and content of the most complicated election process in the world is far better than some of the American channels which I watch. Of course, the benefit Indian channels have is that they are looking at it from a different perspective. They are not looking at it as Democrats or Republicans or as in a very partisan manner. They are looking at as US-India relations primarily and what is good for US. So that gives them a better pedestal to analyze the whole situation. But in spite of making that statement, what I want to further say is that I am learning about it from the Indian channels more than I'm learning about it from the American channels or the American media. In terms of the
I take that as a compliment, sir. I take that as a compliment.
And you must convey that to your team also because they've done a phenomenal job.
Yes, they have, sir. They absolutely need to be lauded.
Yes, so that is one aspect. The other aspect which I want to say is that what I reiterate absolutely what Professor Nalapat said, that is my viewpoint also, that if you have 100 cases launched against a former president of the US and you make him run from one court to the other and one part of the country to the other and spend millions of dollars, maybe not his own money, but you stress them out. It's a phenomenal amount of problems in terms of health, in terms of financial security, in terms of family security, in terms of so many aspects. I've seen people absolutely crumble and fall by the wayside with such an extent of persecution and prosecution and being called a criminal and a felon and 100 other names. Now, if the Democrats had been a little more reasonable about it, if you have 100 cases, you see which are the 5 or 10 or 15 which are, watertight and ironclad and the big ticket items, and then you go for that. And if you also have some balance that while you are doing that with Trump, you also do not protect your own Hunter Biden against all the things which he has done just because his father is the president. So that sort of disparity was there. That sort of distortion of the judicial system was here. That is why there was a lot of talk of weaponizing the judiciary. And that is where some Americans, of all shades, they sort of finally realized that this is more politics than substance, finally. So that also impacted the results. The other point which I want to say is that, Trump is not the best candidate for the US or for the world, and neither is Kamala Harris. So sitting here in the US and having studied US history and being associated with the US for a long time as an academic and as a diplomat, I feel very sad in my heart that the state of affairs in the US has dropped to this rock bottom state, that two candidates which have thrown up are of such poor quality as such for US and for the world, and that you could not have done better than this, what you have done. Now, putting that aside, of course, Trump is far better than what Kamala Harris would have been for US and for US interests globally and for US-India relations. Trump is also going to be much better in dealing with a lot of problems which the US has, outside US. He may create more divisiveness inside the US, but outside the US, vis-a-vis Israel and Gaza, for example, it's very likely that he will tell Iran not to meddle around with great threats, and then tell Israel to sort of start winding down the process and start getting on to regular existence and life, and tell Lebanon also to move away from the border, tell the Hezbollah not to create the complications, tell Hezbollah to abide by the treaty. Similarly, Russia, Ukraine, because he's much more forceful and he's much more emphatic and he gets things on his head. And about the, for example, he also has a very difficult sort of time span for attention to detail, to extensive briefs, to discussions, etc. I know because one of my friends sometimes plays golf with him, and he was the one who mentioned to Trump that, Kamala Harris is a very strange creature. Sometimes she's a black African American, sometimes she becomes an Indian American, sometimes she's a Hindu, sometimes she's a baptized Christian. So he used that to very great effect. And that helped him a lot because it sort of also
Okay.
made a lot of the Hindus.
All right, sir. So we have a house full. Let me also rope in Keith Paz into this conversation. Keith, thank you and welcome to the conversation. I hope you can hear me.
I can, yes.
All right. Well, great to have you here.
Good afternoon, Vinit.
Yes. Good afternoon to you. Well, of all the things that could have gone wrong in Donald Trump's campaign, they did go wrong. And despite that, he's defied all odds. In fact, defied all predictions by pollsters. Here he is as the 47th president of the United States. What do you think actually worked in his favor? If you listen to what Kamala Harris did in the last 3 to 4 months after she got nominated, after she got the ticket, all she did was rant against Donald Trump. That's predominantly what she did. Even in her interviews after the first debate, that's exactly what his modus operandi was. Do you think that was a big mistake on behalf of the Democrats? And Donald Trump sort of mixed it all up. We all know he's a character, and that character stayed with him. He did not change up for anybody. He remained Donald Trump throughout his campaign since 2022.
Well, I think there were 3 reasons this happened. The first thing is Donald Trump is a phenomenon. And he is not a politician, he is a brand. And he's been at this for many, many years. In a democracy, when people go out for elections, especially in the subcontinent, they look at the symbol, don't they? What is the symbol of your party? Most people in the world will not know what the symbol of the Republican Party is, but they know the word Trump. Earlier this year at Easter, I was in Goa, talking to the young son of the gardener. And I said, what do you know about America? And I expected this boy to say Disneyland or Michael Jackson. But he said Donald Trump. So this man is so famous. All us politicians, even an ex-politician, can only worship the fact that his name is so famous and how successful he's been. I think the second thing is that the Democratic campaign, as you've said, Vinit, went horribly wrong. I have a feeling that the Democrats knew this was going to happen. It would have been much worse if Biden was there. The Sleepy Joe label that Trump put on President Biden. He would have won by a huge margin. They did their polling, they spent a massive amount of money, billions, and they decided they had to change Biden and put in Kamala Harris. So actually, even though she lost, she's probably done better than President Biden would have done. I think the third aspect of this is, where does this put America in the world? I'm fascinated by the 2 pledges that he's made. One is, on day 1 of his election, remember, he said that the war in Ukraine would stop, and he gave President Zelensky the opportunity of sitting down with Putin before he took office in January next year to bring an end to the Ukraine war. He said something very similar about the Middle East. He wanted to see peace in the Middle East. So for the rest of the world, I think that is more interesting than what he's promised the American people as far as domestic politics is concerned, because it's the same old thing happening everywhere. The cost of living crisis, the migration crisis if you're in Europe, issues that affect people's lives, education, health, etc. Those domestic issues, I think we have to leave to the Americans. He reminds me, obviously, of those great populist leaders. I think Ambassador Kapoor is absolutely right. It's good for India because he obviously has this very special relationship with Narendra Modi. I mean, everyone will now be his friend. Macron, who was his friend at the beginning and then kind of cooled a little, will now be his friend again, because, of course, he's the most powerful politician in the world. But you're absolutely right to hype this up, Vinit. This is a phenomenal election result. I don't think anyone could have predicted it. Actually, Dr. Nago from the Hudson Institute, when I was on a program with him earlier this week, he was kind of hinting that this was going to happen. Very few people, apart from those in the betting industry, was prepared to put their shirts on the line and say Trump was going to win. And that's what he did. By a huge margin. He even won the popular vote. This is extraordinary, and it's something I think that all politicians who ever seek office. I'm retired now, and I don't know about the rest of the contributors. If they seek office, then he has written the playbook of how to win, even though you're down and out. You're about to go to jail. You are, dragged through the mud. You rise and you become the president of the United States again. It's absolutely phenomenal, Vinit.
You're absolutely right. Valid points there, Keith. In fact, nobody expected or anticipated or even envisaged that this would be the result. But here we are. Politics is unpredictable, just like Donald Trump is. Jason Isaacson, Chief Policy Officer at AJC, also joins us on the program. Jason, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. While, taking a leaf out of what Keith said, which is very interesting, that Donald Trump is not a politician. He should not be viewed as a politician. He's a brand. And as a brand, he's once again established his value by being himself and nobody else. And that's exactly the USP for his victory. What do you say to that?
There's a lot to that, of course. By the way, thank you for having me on NewsX again. He also obviously benefited from the fact that significant majority of Americans disapproved of the performance of the Biden administration, which of course was branded throughout the campaign as the Harris administration in many ways, I think in the minds of many voters. The fact that Kamala Harris could not really disassociate herself successfully from the Biden record. She had a steep hill to climb to try to convince voters that even though the economy is performing better in the last couple of years, really remarkably better, inflation has been tamed, unemployment is down, job creation has been phenomenal, even though it's still in the minds of American voters that prices are much higher than they were when Donald Trump was president. You can't escape that. And of course, the Trump campaign kept reminding people of that. So the economic factor was huge, was decisive, overwhelmed the abortion issue, which people expected, which the Kamala Harris campaign obviously hoped would be decisive in the minds of many voters. Clearly, much more important was the pocketbook issue. The fact that people feel that they're not doing as well as they were doing 4, 5, 6 years ago before the pandemic. And of course, the fear factor invoked by the whole campaign against immigrants was powerful. You can make people angry, you can make people scared, and you can remind them that things aren't as good as they remember them being, sometimes with a somewhat vague memory, 5 or 6 years ago when Donald Trump was president. So that was a combination of factors. Harris had a very difficult challenge to try to overwhelm all of that, overcome all of that in a tremendously compressed campaign that she had to run. So she clearly fell short. Whether there were adjustments that could have been made early on in her campaign, whether adjustments could have been made in the fact that the Democratic ticket came to being only at the end of in the middle of the summer. If President Biden had decided earlier on to drop out of the race, would that have changed the situation, given the Democratic Party a chance to come up with perhaps a different kind of a candidate or introduce their candidate more effectively? All of these issues will be hashed out, of course, be a lot of soul searching on the part of Democrats over the next weeks and months. But you have to hand it to Donald Trump. He was able to sell the fact that his administration was tremendously successful and that it was clearly better than the way people are feeling the country is doing today. People feel that America's on the wrong track. If America on the wrong track and you have an unpopular president, there's very little that a vice president running to replace him can do to overcome that.
Right. Jason, it's obviously important to understand how the American public also viewed Kamala Harris and her nomination. She came into this nomination after Joe Biden bowed out, saying and claiming that, the next 4 years is going to be about this change and that change. But hardly did they touch up upon some of the issues which have been really concerning, the American civil society in the last few years, which is, of course, immigration. So the big question that everybody had on their mind before they went on to vote was that if you already had 4 years to make all these changes, why are you projecting these changes for the next tenure? Why couldn't you have done it in the last 4 years? 4 years. Do you think that was a valid reason for not to vote for the Democrats?
It clearly was decisive in the minds of many voters. Absolutely, the immigration issue wasn't necessarily the highest issue in the minds of voters, but it was high up in that list of priorities. And there was very little that she could say when she was asked at one point on a TV program a couple of months ago how she would differ from policies of the Biden administration. She gave a really ineffective response. But again, she also would point to the fact that there was a bipartisan legislative package that was put together and was killed by Donald Trump earlier this year that would have changed immigration policy and perhaps done a lot to arrest the surge of illegal immigration that occurred. But it was too late at that point. This was a big, fat, juicy issue for the Republicans to seize on, and they did it extremely effectively. And the Democrats just didn't have a good enough answer other than there was an effective bipartisan response that was put forward, and Donald Trump killed it. So that doesn't quite do enough for a voter who's looking for a change. And you had Donald Trump saying that she broke it, he's going to fix it, and that won. That really persuaded enough people that okay, things weren't so bad when he was president. Okay, he's a little crazy, but actually I had more money in my pocket. Things felt a little calmer. We had fewer wars that we were worried about that were popping up in the news every day. Let's give it to the guy who's a successful businessman and he knows how to get the job done.
And he's backed by somebody who's ruling the roost when it comes to business acumen and wealth, Elon Musk. You've obviously made some important points, Jason. Last question for you is, what exactly was on the common American's mind when they went out to vote for Donald Trump? I know, issues like abortion, Roe and Wade have also, made a difference in how people see this. But what was that number one issue that people wanted Donald Trump to change as president?
I think primarily economy. I think that, frankly, neither candidate had tremendously high approval ratings. There was a significant disapproval of both. I do remember seeing a poll that suggested that perhaps in terms of character, Donald Trump's disapproval was higher than Kamala Harris's. But the dominant view, I think, in the minds of many people is, will I be better off? Will my family be better off? Safer? On the immigration issue, they really hugely emphasized the fear factor caused by illegal immigration, undocumented immigrants, and a lot of exaggeration. But nevertheless, people felt they would be safer under Donald Trump and they would do better economically under Donald Trump. That's part of their recollection from what happened when he was president 4 years ago. And that was the point that was emphasized again and again in the advertising.
Jason, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Safer and better off. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. All right, Rick Mehta, Republican entrepreneur and attorney, also with us on the program. Rick, a very good evening to you. Depending on the time zone, I don't know where you are right now. But first up, congratulations. Donald Trump is back on the saddle. There are a number of tangents and avenues that we have covered. In your opinion, what defines this second comeback for Donald Trump? We all remember his presidency towards the end of his tenure in 2019 when COVID was around. A lot of mismanagement during COVID, basically isolated and eclipsed the good work that Donald Trump had done, and all people remembered was him handling COVID-19. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people, a lot of leaders in a lot of countries floundered in dealing with COVID-19 because, it was something so new and novel that it was very difficult to manage things? Do you think that Donald Trump still had a lot of presidency left in him, and that's the reason why he's made a comeback? And the last 4 years after COVID-19 haven't exactly been ideal for the Americans. If you compared some of the stats related to especially immigration, where you had about 1 million people coming in between 2016 and 2020 from the southern border, and from 2020 to 2024, that number went 10 times higher.
Well, yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks. It's a great day to be an American. It's a great day to be in America. I'm calling in from New York today. I'll tell you right now, one of the, I think, most relieving moments for President-elect Donald Trump is that he's finally done campaigning. He's finally done. And that's important because he is term limited. This is going to be his second term, the only the second person in the history of America to win non-consecutive terms. And so what happens now is that Donald Trump can write his own agenda without political ramifications or without thinking about what the next election is going to look like. And so if his accomplishments were successful in the beginning of his first term in 2017, the pre-COVID eras, then one can only imagine how great Donald Trump will be in reshaping America in his second term. And already plans are being put into place. So, for example, he has tremendous amount of support, both from Democrats. Remember, Robert F. Kennedy decided to support Donald Trump and drop his presidential bid. And so the shaping of what the agency, the administration under a Trump presidency is going to look like is going to cover very, very important areas of policy, including the U.S. healthcare system that by far spends more on patients than any other country, but gets the least amount of results. With education, when we talk about spending for our children, we spend the most out of any country in the world and get the least amount of results. And so all of this is going to be an administration that creates value for Americans. And I'll tell you, also from an economy and an immigration, which if you look at the exit polls, that was absolutely the top of mind for people that were going into the voting booths. And the reason why he won the swing states, especially among low propensity voters, the economy is going to matter. And I think we're gearing up for what is going to be what Donald Trump has called the golden years of America, which means lowering that inflation, lowering the interest rates, and making sure that jobs are protected for Americans. And so other countries should be lining up to have partnerships. At the end of the day, Donald Trump is a deal maker, right? He's a deal maker. He's not just on policy or principle, but on what's going to be best for America. And so we know that there's going to be a closer relationship with India. China should be nervous right now with the tariffs. But most importantly, we're going to see a resurgence of manufacturing, supply chain, and other things right here domestically in America. And on his first day, he said that he's going to have one of the most mass deportations of illegal immigrants, which for India and other countries should be opening up a more streamlined process for legal immigration, of which Donald Trump has been supportive of. So this is not just in America, but the reverberations we're going to see across the entire world, what the second Trump presidency, where he's term limited, is going to look like, where he has no encumbrances to effectuate the policies to what he desires, of which is driven by one mission alone, putting America first.
Right, Rick, those are absolutely valid points. So what can we expect now from Donald Trump? He's already said during his campaign that he's going to end the Ukraine war. He's already said that he's going to take care of the situation between Israel and Iran. We have heard similar things from Donald Trump in the past as well. The left always keeps going at him, including late night shows such as Jimmy Kimmel, who in fact talk about his health plan, which has been spoken of many times but has never come through. Are we going to see more action from Donald Trump this time around than words?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, like I said, Donald Trump is now term limited. So he is going to put pen to paper. And we saw that. And look, the biggest difference here is that it's not a guessing game. We already know what a Donald Trump presidency looks like, and we know how the economy was booming. Right now, we're at depression level unemployment rates. That's scary. Even if the stock market is performing well, so many Americans are out of a job. And so when when Donald Trump was president, we saw some of the lowest unemployment rates, especially among minority groups that are continuously struggle with employment. And so, that is going to be top of mind. The economy will always be first. Now, second, let's talk about foreign affairs for a minute. Under a Donald Trump presidency in his first term, we had peace. We had peace. There was no aggression by Russia to Ukraine. There was no terrorist attacks that led to the war with Israel and Palestine. And so, these are areas of expertise that Donald Trump brings to the table, which is, again, based on one principle and one principle alone for him, which is nonviolence, and it's peace. And that's what we had. Now, for some reason, the Democrats continue to distort and twist the words. But under a Kamala Harris presidency, in this current administration, we've had raging wars across the world and promising to resolve those conflicts, but never rolling up their sleeves, getting involved and ending them. And so while we don't know exactly what President Trump is going to do to end the war in Ukraine, what we do know is that he's a deal maker, and that under his first term we had peace, and that he's been very effectively been able to neutralize threats across the world. I mean, listen, the man stepped foot into North Korea. He shook hands, and brought a dictator basically to his knees. And right now, what do we see? We see North Korean troops being sent to Russia to fight in a war. Never would you have seen that under a Trump presidency. And so the entire world should be rejoicing that peace will soon be had across the world.
Rick, what about people who have supported Donald Trump, especially people like Bobby Kennedy, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard? Where do you find them? Are they going to be rewarded for their loyalty towards Trump? Bobby Kennedy, of course, his father, the late Robert F. Kennedy, who was a prominent Democrat, his son, now a Republican. Will these people be rewarded by Donald Trump? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the word loyalty to Trump, and I kind of, take a little bit of a step back on that. I think their loyalty has been to America and to the Constitution. So you have to see what are the principles of where their loyalty lay, right? For Elon Musk, it's very much on First Amendment rights. It's a freedom of speech and the ability that big tech doesn't come in and chill and suppress voices in order to create and influence a biased outcome, which we've seen time and time again. Even in this own election, we saw Google admittedly biasing the outcomes of search engines towards the Democrats. So that's his motivation. Vivek Ramaswamy, very similar. He's an entrepreneur, an innovator. He wants to see the greatness of America, but he believes in preserving the constitutional principles. Bobby Kennedy, as I mentioned again, his remit has been less government intervention into personal choices and informed consent for patients, which right now we have a significantly high amount of government involvement with mandating, especially on vaccines and other public health tools, where we haven't really assessed the benefit versus the risk. And so Bobby Kennedy's entire remit is to let the data be transparent and empower people to make decisions. And so for all of these pieces of principles, I think that the Trump administration will take very significant stock into what sacrifices these individuals have made. Again, remember, both Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, Bobby Kennedy, these are very, very wealthy individuals who don't need a government job. And so if they're doing it, it's because they believe in the principles that many Americans believe in. And so the reward is more so to be able to effectuate change that supports constitutional rights. And I truly believe that these men that have stepped up really are doing it for the right reasons, the principled reasons of protecting our republic and protecting our constitutional rights. And so for those reasons alone, the loyalty to the Constitution, I think the reward will be the ability to effectuate change for the betterment of America.
Rick, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for sparing time and speaking with NewsX. All right, Professor Rohan Gunaratna, Middle East Affairs expert, also with us on the program. Professor Gunaratna, appreciate you joining us. Well, the Middle East is an area at this point in time which could definitely use a strong leader. There has been constant support traditionally from the Americans towards Israel. But there hasn't been too much talk from either Joe Biden or his staff when it comes to settling affairs between Iran and Israel. Do you think Donald Trump has the gumption, has that art of the deal to bring both these sides to the table, something that Bill Clinton also did in the early 90s with Yasser Arafat and the Israeli leadership? Of course, that did not amount to anything. Do you think that Donald Trump is the person who can make some sort of a difference?
Trump is the only leader in the United States who can make a difference in the Middle East. Why? Because Trump has clearly told Iran that nuclear weapons are bad. So he has already sent a threat to Iran, and that itself will regulate Iran's conduct. Netanyahu is determined to dismantle Iran's nuclear infrastructure. He has been very patiently waiting for Trump to win. Today he sent his greetings to Donald Trump, and I want to share with you that they both enjoy a very close relationship, and as a result of that, I personally believe that the dynamics in the Middle East will change. In fact, his message says, "Congratulations on history's greatest comeback. Your historic return to the White House offers a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. This is a huge victory in true friendship, Benjamin and Sarah Netanyahu." So this demonstrates that the alliance between Israel and the United States will strengthen, and that Iran will be kept in check, because currently Iran is sponsoring 6 threat groups and Israel is facing a 7-front war. So I personally believe that not only the Russia-Ukraine conflict will come to an end, but Trump's re-election will restore stability and security in the Middle East.
Right. Professor Gunaratna, appreciate you joining us. In fact, you have given us a perfect ending and a sum up and a summary to this show. Thank you so much for joining us. On that note, we take a short break. Be right back.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.